Well, welcome back, everyone. Lights, camera, action. It's Make Our World Your Runway. You know, this is the weekly show that interviews the most fascinating individuals from the world of modeling, fashion, beauty, pageantry, business, and even the entertainment industry. And as always, we have a wonderful guest and show planned for you today. But before we begin, we do like to thank the sponsors that make this show so possible every week. And that is the Global Trade Chamber, 100 Successful Women in Business, Lux Salon, Queen Beauty Network, Tower Club, Royal Dames, Vita Designs, Casa Calabria, and the Bangladesh American Chamber of Commerce. So sponsors, thank you so much for making this show possible. And as always, we like to tell our viewers, remember to subscribe to the Global Trade Chamber YouTube channel so that you can see all the shows from Make Our World Your Runway and Success Stories. And I highly recommend our viewers to tune into Success Stories because this show features the most amazing women in the world of business and community service. From humble beginnings to successful entrepreneurs, these women will totally inspire you. And of course, get ready for some exciting conferences, speakers, and awards as 100 Successful Women in Business and the Global Trade Chamber are going to be coming to a city near you. And that city is going to be Sunrise, Florida. It is going to be on May 14th. It's a nationwide road show. It's Women Business Expo. It's a full day of conferences, networking, connections designed to help women grow, scale, and lead. So once again, it's business expos and vendors, expert speakers, high-impact networking, and nationwide exposure. It's going to be at the Civic Center in Sunrise. It's going to be from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. in the afternoon. Now, there are speaker opportunities available and also vendor opportunities, but you must register. So please go to event@globaltradechamber.com for all the information or dial 954-839-8866. It's also a free event, but you must register to attend. Take it from me, I've gone to all these events and they are a complete sellout. So once again, go to the email event@globaltradechamber.com or 954-839-8866 for all the information. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get on to our show. Our guest here, is a multifaceted leader at the intersection of law, media, marketing, and human connection. With over 30 years of legal experience, she's an attorney, founder, media producer, speaker, educator, and the visionary behind Laws of Life. That is a global empowerment platform designed to elevate entrepreneurs, leaders, and communities. And as founder and president of Laws of Life, she produces a high-impact talk show, podcast, live events, and networking experience that amplify voices and create meaningful strategic connections. Known as the Queen of Networking, and I like that, she has curated a global community of more than 55,000 contacts, facilitating authentic relationships that drive growth and opportunity, and she is also the founder of BPG Law. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Bianca Perper Greenstein, simply known as Bianca, to Make Our World Your Runway. So Bianca, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here with you. This is amazing.
And we're honored to have you. And reading through this, and I also want to tell our viewers that you were recognized as a Top 100 Women in Business Award and a Peace Ambassador Award. So I thought I had accomplishments. I mean, you take the cake after reading this.
Oh, thank you.
I feel like, whoa, I need to step up my game.
You're too kind. I really appreciate that. And that was an amazing event, that 100 Women in Business.
Oh, that's always the 100 Successful Women. You were at the one in Miami, I believe, right? Yes. I remember that because I was emceeing that show. And, I've been to a lot of them. I even went to the one when they did it in London, England. Oh, my God. They had women from over 30 some odd countries plus that attended that event. It was beautiful. I said, I'm not missing that trip. And, this year, they did want to go to Dubai, but unfortunately with everything that's going on in the Middle East, I mean, it was, they had the hotel, they even had a cruise for everybody, around the city. But next year, probably in 2027, so I know Marie's working on something for the end of the year, but that would have really been a wonderful trip. But they've been to Las Vegas, they've been to Puerto Rico. They do these shows all over the place, and there's a lot of women that really do attend.
It's extraordinary. I made some really great friends at the event, and it was an honor to be a part of it.
Yeah, it was an honor to be part of it. I mean, I loved getting up there and emceeing, and just the fact that the fashion show. And, you know, two of my ladies, in fact, several of my ladies have gotten the 100 Successful Women in Business Award. And, you know, I'm an ambassador now to the chamber and, you know, for 100 Successful Women. And I tell a lot of women that want to join the pageant, I said, these are the opportunities and the doors that we can open up for you. Yeah. Because we need more women out there networking.
For sure. Women's empowerment is all about helping all of us rise, and I love that. That's why I love that event. It was amazing. Great platform.
Great platform, yeah. I mean, just the name alone, 100 Successful Women in Business. Just that name is really unbelievable. And it's true, because there are so many women out there that do so much good for the community, but really don't know what particular organizations to get into. And, you know, it was a funny thing last year, because I normally watch MSNBC in the morning, and I happened to be listening to Mika Brzezinski, who has Know Your Value, and they have 30 over 30, 40 over 40, 50 over 50. In fact, she was supposed to do her show in Dubai this year, but unfortunately couldn't go there. But she interviewed a woman that this really stayed with me. They interviewed this woman that was 90 years old. She had been a seamstress, and she retired at about 65. She got bored, and she said she didn't know what to do, so she decided to go back to becoming a seamstress and made $1 million in 1 year. I almost fell off my chair. I said, wait a minute, that's hope. $1 million in 1 year, going back to becoming a seamstress. And they honored her with the Know Your Value Award. And I said, why not? I said, unbelievable, because at that age to come back, she really was, she was bored. She said she really didn't need the money, but who's going to turn down $1 million, okay? She said every store was after her. She said the big ones, Nordstrom's, Neiman Marcus, Saks, Bloomingdale's. And when they interviewed her, to look at her, you wouldn't think she was 90 years old.
Well, 90's the new 45.
I know, my mother went to 94 and didn't have a wrinkle in the face. I said, boy, I better get to that age.
Well, that's what keeps you young, right? When you have a purpose, you have a mission, you stay connected to people. I always tell people it's not the material things that bring joy in life, it's connection.
Yes.
Doing shows like this, building relationships, and that's an amazing story. I'll have to look her up.
Oh, yeah, I can't remember her name, but I know I got to go back on the site. I know she was there. But when they interviewed her, I was like, what the heck is this? 90 years old, is going back to be a seamstress. I said, okay. I said, but you know what? There was a lot of women that really related to that, because they said if she could do it at 90, you know, a lot of people say, well, and I hear, not even women, I hear men say this in general, well, you know, I'm in my 70s, you know, it's my age, and wait a minute. Age is up here, it's only a state of mind, okay? I said, if you're going to think that way, you never then why not get the box today, and there you go. I said, you know, I'm not ready for that. I said, I'm going to keep my feet up on the ground as long as I can, you know. I just hope they don't clone me with all these robots running around, because
that's impossible. You can't be cloned. You're too.
No, that's what
you're too special.
Thank you. So are you. I said, when they made me, they broke that mold. There is no, like, you know, and it's funny because that question was asked to me about, Angela, if you had to come back as someone, who do you want to come back with? I said, me.
Love that.
They said, what? I said, me. I said, because I know who I am and what I am.
And you've perfected you.
So
why would you want to start over?
Thank you. Why would I want to start over again? I said, just bring me back the way I was. Now, supposedly, when they traced my family tree, okay, because my family did come from Rome, so we know we were part of the Roman Empire, which Max sitting over there likes that. But it was so funny because, you know, when the Romans went into Egypt, okay, they kind of bonded. And they found out that part of my family even went back to the Egyptians. So every time there's this bust of Nefertiti that comes up, it's supposedly my left profile. And when I was in Greece, I walked into the Athenian Palace, and okay, in the Museum of Mykonos. And we couldn't understand what the woman, they were coming all around me and they're putting flowers down. And I said to my husband, I said, what did I do? I said, do I have a hole in my dress or something? And they're going, Nefertiti, Nefertiti. I said, oh no, they thought I was reincarnated. It's Nefertiti. They had me on Greek television and everything.
Seriously?
Seriously.
That's amazing.
But here's the funniest thing.
You were a celebrity.
Yeah, I didn't even know it. The funniest thing was ABC had done a whole thing on Tutankhamun. When Tutankhamun was here, and they did a whole thing on Nefertiti. They redid the bust and the face of Nefertiti. You know, they did it 3D. It was beautiful. People were looking at this and calling me up. They said, Angela, did you see it? I said, no, not yet. I've heard about it. When I looked at it, I said, uh-oh, it's me. Somebody copied my face. Salty. I said, they think I'm supposed to be this reincarnated, okay, queen. Well, yeah, I'm wondering about that. I even had news media people call me up. They said, listen, you know, when you make out your last will and testament with all that gold you have, just remember us. I said, well, if I'm buried with it, we better go dig it up. But it's funny because this is another true story. When Winterfest did the boat parade and their theme, going back when they had all the Tutankhamun artifacts here, they did the Jewel of the Nile. And they had the casket there with, was supposed to be King Tut in there and everything was recreated. I walked in there, and they had the famous archaeologist from Egypt at the Black Tie Gala. I walked into the room, nobody was in there, people walking out. All of a sudden, the doors closed, it locked, and the lights went out. And I'm like, uh-oh. So the archaeologist, like, they get the doors open, he said, see, you are reincarnated. I said, no, I'm not. I said, bye. I said, imagine being in a room with doors locking. So it's got to be something to be said about where.
Well, maybe that'll bring you some luck.
Yeah, you're right. It probably will. Yeah.
The lottery for sure. Maybe you'll get the million that way.
That's for sure. I'll get the million that. Yeah, get the million that way. But anyway, on your accomplishments, okay, you are an attorney. What made you go into that field?
Well, I am the daughter of 2 Romanian immigrants. And my dad was a doctor and a lawyer. My parents really pushed academics. So in my family, you had to be a doctor or a lawyer or you would literally be disowned. So sounds familiar? So my 2 older brothers became doctors. Wow. And I just said to my dad, I'm like, listen, I just don't like hospitals. I'm really not good at math and science. I don't think medicine's going to be my gig. So I decided to go to law school, and I enjoyed it. It was an amazing experience, and I've loved the practice of law for sure.
When I was in high school, they wanted me to go into law. They had these mock trials, and they used to take us into courts to see how the judges worked and how, you know, the law worked. And I was fascinated in it. So they had these mock trials. And they said, we're going to do like 8 cases today. I said, well, okay. So I was defense, and then they had, you know, the prosecuting attorney. I lost 1 case that day. I won 7.
Only 1? That's pretty good odds.
I lost 7. So in high school, they were calling me the female Perry Mason. I said, but I didn't, well, because I was a singer, and I got a scholarship to the Juilliard. I went that route, okay? So I didn't go into law, but it's something I should have gone into because I did enjoy it. And I was always fascinated with the law, okay? And it was funny because this is normally not like me, and I'll never forget this one particular judge. But I did do court reporting for a while. Okay. So I was in the courts, and I don't know what it was, but in Bergen County, New Jersey, there was this one judge, Judge Madden, and he basically did criminal cases. And we're in there taking notes. I don't know what it was, but he hated the prosecuting attorney that day. He just hated him. Prosecuting attorney got up, and he started to present his case, and Judge Madden just looked at him. He says, you know, I don't like the way you present it. I don't even like the color of the suit you got on. He says, everybody out of here dismissed. Come back tomorrow. So I'm looking at him and says, does that mean me too? He said, what did I just say? Everybody's. Okay, Judge, bye. So I went back into the room. He says, I didn't mean to come at you like that. I said, no. I said, maybe I shouldn't have said that. He said, did you see what he looked like? I said, yeah, I can understand why you didn't like him. He says, I want another prosecuting attorney. Judge Madden was something else. He was lovely when he wasn't on that bench. When he was on that bench, he was all law. And then it was funny because I got into New York City. I got into a little altercation one time. Somebody attacked my husband, and I was trying to go after them. Wow. And the gentleman there, I punched his wife out. So they wound up.
There you go.
I had to go to court over that.
Everybody gets a defense. It was self-defense of your husband?
Yeah, it was self-defense. But I had to wind up going to court.
Okay.
So when I went to court, I walked in. I was on my way to work that day. It was cold. I had my fur coat on, my boots. And the attorney said to me, look, he says, I'm just going to tell the judge you don't understand the language and see if, we'll drop this case. So I'm looking at this prosecuting attorney, and I said, something's not right here. So he's talking to the judge. This was a young judge. He couldn't have been no more than about 35 years old. And he says, my client really doesn't understand the language that well. He says, I would like to, he said, drop the cases. And he explained to him, he said, what went on. I looked at the prosecuting attorney and I looked at the judge. I said, excuse me. I said, Your Honor. And I thought this guy was going to crack up. I said, I'm standing here with a fur coat on. I got my makeup on. I got boots on. I said, do you think I really do not understand the English language? He laughed so hard. He cracked up. He said, this is the first honest person, he says, I've had in my courtroom today. He says, case dismissed, get out of here. He told the prosecuting attorney, I want to see you. He says, in my chambers. I said, wow. He looked at me, thanks a lot. I said, oh, thank you. I said, here I am. Do I look like somebody that doesn't understand?
You got the fashion dismissal.
Yeah, exactly.
Fashion does matter in the courtroom.
It does. In fact, I got an award one time. It was here in Florida. It was up in Palm Beach, and they asked me to do jury duty. And they were still going through the jurors, and on the third day, I got dismissed. But the judge said to me, she said, could you approach the bench? And I said, oh. So I'm scratching my head.
I love your outfit.
That's exactly. And guess what? She gave me an award because she said, you were the best. She gave me the best dressed award.
I love that. That is inspiring.
Yeah.
You are my hero.
She said, because you came into this courtroom every day dressed, your makeup, your hair was perfect. She said, you'll respect the law. And I said, well, Your Honor, I said, I was a court reporter. I said, and I did study law. I said, and yes, you don't come into the courtroom, I said, looking like you're going to the circus. She said, I love that. And she presented me with an award because she said, I just thought you were amazing.
That is amazing. Yeah, love that story.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you know who he is, but for 12 years in Palm Beach, Dave Arenberg was the Palm Beach state attorney. Sure. And I became great friends with Dave. And every time I'd go into Dave's office, that's the first thing they'd say downstairs, the guards, and they said, Miss Fashion's coming up. I said, wait a minute, where did you get that from? They said, and I'd always go in his office dressed. And Dave said, well, this is a casual visit. I said, Dave, I said, somebody like you who's on television every morning, you're the Palm Beach state attorney. I said, I'm going to come in here, I said, looking like I just got out of bed. I said, what are you, nuts? I said, I'm respecting your time. He always appreciated that. And on television, he once said, right on MSNBC, he says, Angela, he says, is my biggest, he says, promoter, sponsor. He said, she always, he said, has something nice to say about me. And what I liked about Dave, and I tell him this till this day, if I didn't understand something, I'd say, Dave, because I could call him up and I said, explain this to me. He said, look, you may not like what I'm going to tell you. He says, but I'm going to quote you the law. And I said, that's what I want to hear, okay? And I had a case with the nursing home, and I called him up. He said, you may not like what I'm going to tell you. He said, but it's going to be tough to go against the nursing home. He said, they've got it locked up, okay? And I said, you got to be kidding. He says, no. He said, there's times you can't bend the law. You can't fight the law.
Yeah, I actually have a talk show called The Laws of, well, we have a talk show and we have a podcast. Oh, okay. So what happened is back in 2017, I started my talk show, and we do it every Tuesday, and we've never missed a show in the last 9 years. and we bring the community together. It's a hybrid talk show. And then last year, 227 Media came in as an investor and gave us our own studio.
Wow.
And produces the Laws of Life podcast. And we just, and we've gotten 1 million views on our content this month. And it's been a really exciting time. I get to interview all different types of people. I'm really looking forward to interviewing you.
Yes, yes.
And I love it. Interviewing is my true passion. I've been interviewed over 4,000 people, and it's a great opportunity for businesses to come on and talk about their business or charities or whatever someone's mission or purpose is. So I love it.
Exactly. See, you're like me. Even though I have the beauty pageant and it kind of fits in with a lot of things that I do, but when you tell me show business, okay, I'll drop everything. You want to put me on stage tomorrow? No problem, okay? I'll stop everything for that. Just this fact is bringing back the Copacabana. I said, oh my God, this is an opportunity for me to get back on stage. And, I always tell people when I performed in Phantom of the Opera, that was probably the most memorable time of my life, okay? Because what had happened was I was in New York City and I had gone for a Disney audition. And they loved the way I sang and everything, but they were more looking for people that could be in the park and sing to the kids. They of all the people that auditioned that day, they took this guy that played a guitar because he could sing to the kids and they could dress him up. And so I came out of there and I said, that's it, I'm going home today, okay? And Disney wasn't really explicit on what they wanted. They just said they were looking for singers. Very good friend of mine said, Angela, he said, go over to Schubert Theater. I said, why? He said, they're holding auditions today. He said, for understudies for Sarah Brighton. I said, I've had it. I'm going home. He said, do yourself a favor. You're not that far. He said, I have a good feeling about it. Go. I said, okay. So I went over there. One of the pianists that I knew, he was playing, and he knew that the key that I sang in. So I did 16 bars of All I Ask of You. And they said, okay. They said, we'll call you, leave your information, so you leave your picture and all that. By the time I got home, they were calling me. And they said, you're one of the understudies. I said, you've got to be kidding me. I said, did I die and just wake up in heaven and hell, or what's going on? They said, no, this you've got it. And Sarah Brighton really, she kind of wanted to get out of it. She did it in England. She did it in New York. She was doing matinees, like 7 shows a week. And she wanted to go out on her own. So the tour came up. They wanted the Phantom of the Opera tour, the East Coast tour. She said, that's it. After New York was going to close, she said, no. She said, I'm going to get out and go on my own. So they asked, there was 3 of us that were on the studies. They said, who would want to do the tour? This was the first hand that went up. I said, you got it. And I did it.
Wow.
And it was, I worked with a 55-piece orchestra.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You got to sing to a 55-piece
orchestra. Yep.
We got to watch the footage on that. I want to see that.
There should still be footage on it. And the conductor passed away, unfortunately. And we were actually going to, last year when I did my pageant, I was going to start bringing that back. And the gentleman that played the Phantom, he had moved down to Florida even before I had gotten here. And I called him up and I said to him, I said, Paul, I said, listen, this is what I'm doing. I said, in September, would you like to come back on stage, just you and I? We could do a live to track. He said, oh, I love it. I called him in the month of April. His wife called me in May and said, I don't have good news. I said, what? She said, Paul passed away. I said, wait a minute. I said, but I didn't know that he had cancer. And he was a big guy, 6'4", looked just like the Phantom, was a former police officer. And she said to me, but what really got to me, she said, Angela, you were his favorite Christine, because I played the part of Christine Daae. And I said, you know what, wherever he is, I said, tell him he was my favorite Phantom. I said, because to tour with this gentleman and with this 55-piece orchestra, this was absolutely amazing. I mean, we did it, and when we did it in Atlantic City, people they went crazy. We did it at the Caesars Palace. I mean, it was just spectacular. And I said, those were the days. I said, so if I could recreate that, I said, boy, I would be happy.
That's where your heart really is. I think singing is your #1 passion.
That and being on stage, that's my number. I was like 2 years old when my family threw me out on stage. I was like 2 or 3 years old, and they just threw me out, and they said I never had stage fright. I said, yes, I do. I said, because I was mean behind stage. That was my stage. I said, but in fact, I just read that Barbra Streisand, as talented as she is, wants to get psychological help because her stage, before she goes on stage, and it's true, she throws up, she's terrified.
Really? I didn't know that.
Barbra Streisand is terrified of being on stage. My husband could tell you, I won't throw up, but you don't want to come 2 feet near me behind stage. I'm like a terror.
High anxiety.
Real high anxiety. Mel Brooks could remake that movie. High anxiety. Don't come near me. You might get a glass in your face. But the minute I get on stage.
Note to self. I'm staying away from you.
The minute I get on stage. And my husband always said, you're a different person on that. I said, yes. Because once I take that mic in my hand, I settle down. I look at my audience. I love what I'm doing. And Al says, you're the sweetest person on that stage. I said, yes, I am. And then afterwards, I'm sweet again. But he said, don't go near her, he said, before she goes on that stage. And it was one time I was in a competition. And I'm sitting behind stage, and I'm grinding my teeth. I'm listening to the singers ahead of me. And somebody said, you feeling okay? I said, yeah. I said, I feel like the werewolf right now. But by getting mad, that's what made me get out and perform, and I won. I won that competition because I was listening to these singers ahead of time. I was like, I don't believe this. This one can't sing. That one can't sing. And that's what my husband said to me. You're mean. He said, you could never be on American Idol. I said, oh, no. Don't ask me to be on there. I said, as a judge, because everybody would be getting a 0.
Oh, my goodness.
Because you know what it is? And most opera singers are like this. When you study the opera, okay, and you go to the Juilliard, that is what you call intense training. You could have a perfect audition. The teachers will literally come into your face and scream, I can't hear you. What are you doing? This is how you're going to go out on an audience, but they do that for a reason. So my ears are so highly trained that even myself, I'll pick up my own mistake. The audience will say to me, that was fabulous. I said, no, it's not. Because I can hear it. I can hear when I'm off. But when I listen to some of these other singers, I say, what the heck are they doing? Why are they singing through their nose or this? And just standing there like statues. You got to move. You got to put, yeah, you got to put that feeling behind it. And that's why I said, I was asked to be a judge on American Idol. I said, no thanks.
Oh,
I said, that's because I'm too mean. My husband could tell you. He said, I'm glad you turned them down. He said, because they would have hated you. I said, yeah, they would have. I said, because
the judge America loves to hate.
Right. Nobody would have got a 10. It may be 1 or 2.
Yeah, but then when someone really did well, America would know they were
Exactly.
good. And that's why they love Simon Cowell.
Yeah, that's why.
Because he's brutally honest.
Well, Dancing with the Stars, that's the reason why, you know, you listen to a couple of those judges, especially Bruno, he'll tell you straight out, you know, what did you do? And you know, and I studied dance. Okay.
You had to, being
I had to because it made me move, okay? And I had the distinct pleasure 2 years ago of studying with Maxim Cherkovsky from Dancing with the Stars.
Wow, that's incredible.
He owns a dance studio in Boca called Dance With Me, and I took a couple of my girls there. And I loved studying, even though I'm not the dancer Max is, but Max, when you study with him, he puts so much energy into what he does, okay? And it's the feeling. So if you get the feeling of dance, you can portray that when you sing, okay? Mm-hmm. And I mean, unless you're singing a ballad or love song, or like Sinatra used to do the old blues bar songs where you're sitting on a bar stool. And even with that, you gotta have that feeling, okay? But when you study dance, a lot of people used to say, well, you're a singer, why are you taking dance lessons? I said, because it's the movement.
Oh, you have to, because a singer that just stays stationary is boring.
Exactly. Somebody that just doesn't. And you know, it was funny. Johnny Mathis always had a gorgeous voice. But in the beginning, he kind of just stood there, okay? Later on, his whole persona changed.
Did you have a crush on him?
Johnny? I knew Johnny very well. I met him through his sister.
Wow. You know a lot of famous people, huh?
Yeah. And my husband didn't believe I knew Johnny Mathis. He thought I was fibbing, I was telling a story. He came into Bergdorf Goodman one day where I was working, And I said to him, I said, Al, I said, I would like you to meet Marguerite Mathis. He looked at her and he said, oh my God, that's the female Johnny Mathis. And then I took him to the show and he said, you do know John? I said, yeah. I said, I know John. I went with Marguerite. We even stayed at John's house.
What?
Oh, yeah. When John did a show in New York City, he was at Tower Records, back then when people were still buying albums. And he partnered with Henry Mancini, and the name of the album was called The Hollywood Classics. He was signing autographs that day. He was signing the albums. I walked in with his sister. He saw me come in. He said, that's it, session's over. He said, come on, darling, let's go. I said, where are we going? He said, we're going to Il Malastrillo's, he says, for lunch. I said, what about Marguerite? He said, she can ride with somebody else. We're taking the limo. We went to Il Malastrillo.
So he sounds like he was like really fun.
Oh, he was the sweetest person you'd ever want to know.
He struck me as really mellow.
He is, but if he likes you and you get to know him and you're part of the family, he's not as mellow as when you see him on an interview or you see him on stage. John was a little bit of a character.
Wow.
So was his sister. Oh yeah. Off stage, they were high energy. Okay.
So who's the most famous person you've met?
Frank Sinatra.
Oh God, my hero. I only perform Frank Sinatra when I do karaoke. I love him so much.
Right. I had dinner with Frank Sinatra.
Wow.
At Rocky Lee's on 52nd Street in New York. And I tell everyone that you had to sit there and really listen to Sinatra. He was a lot different than what he portrayed, okay? He was telling a story that night, and nobody knew that he was a silent partner for the LA Dodgers. And this is when the Yankees and the Dodgers were in the World Series. And he's sitting next to Tommy Lasorda, who was the Yankees manager at the time. And he says, well, they were talking about Dean Martin and, the whole Rat Pack. And he says, well, there's one thing I don't like about Dean. Everybody looked up. He says, when my kids go into a recording studio, he says, I tell them, just don't think because the name is Sinatra, you're going to get everything for nothing. You got to work it. He said, like I worked it. He said, when Dean's kids come in, he said, they expect everything because the name is Dean Martin. He said, I've told Dean, do not do that. This is not a free ride. He said, you got to work for it. And I just looked and I was like, that's coming out of Frank Sinatra. But he was very charitable, okay? I mean, people didn't know that one time he traveled the world and gave to children's charities. He gave a lot of money. There was a time he was in a restaurant and a waiter was talking about wanting to go to college, didn't have the money, and he wrote him out a check.
That's so beautiful.
Sinatra was probably one of the most giving individuals that I thought I had ever met. But people didn't know that side of him. They knew the Marilyn Monroes and the Rat Pack. And yeah, they stayed up till 4 o'clock in the morning and had their grand old parties. But that was show business. That's the way it was, okay? But to really sit down and listen to him speak, and when he came in, we all had to stand. And when he left, we had to raise the glass, okay? And, what he said in Italian, 100 years, and Cello Ludan, that lived 100 years. But very, very charitable, yes. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful person. So,
what a blessing to have met such an extraordinary man.
So if that's your hero, that was my uncle's hero. Oh my God, he'd stand online till 2 o'clock in the morning just to see him perform. And my uncle got mad at me. He says, you didn't take me to that dinner? I said, no. I said, it was a spur of the moment thing. My uncle didn't talk to me for 6 months.
You can't win them all.
I can't win them all. So Uncle Tony, if you're up there, forgive me. But anyway, Max is telling me we've got about 5 minutes. So is there anything you want to tell our viewers about you and where to find you and what you want them to know?
I just want to invite everyone to be a part of the Laws of Life platform. We have our show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. and they can join on Zoom, or you can join us in our own studio, only 3 blocks from the Hard Rock. You can also follow me on Instagram at Blanca Laws of Life. You can apply to be a guest on the talk show or the podcast. There's a lot of ways that our team can support. We also do media, photography, podcast production, documentaries, and now we're starting to do vertical dramas.
Oh, wow. That's great.
So we're having fun with that. And of course, I'm also an attorney. So if anyone out there has a legal matter that they need help with, feel free to reach me anytime.
That's great. Yes, and it was such a pleasure to have you on the show. As I said, anytime you want to come back, you always have an open invitation to Make Our World Your Runway.
Well, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I had an amazing conversation with you, and I can't wait to have you on my show as well. And really an honor to be here today.
Yes, it was an honor to have you. So, ladies and gentlemen, there you heard it, the wonderful Blanca. And as always, we want to remind you to subscribe to the Global Trade Chamber YouTube channel so that you can see all the shows from Make Our World Your Runway and, of course, success stories. And, you know, we always have wonderful things lined up. Last week, okay, we went live because of Salsa Fest. Today we have a guest. Next week we will probably be at a live event. So stay tuned because you never know what's going to happen at Make Your World Your Runway. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week with another wonderful show.